potentially abusive households, drug and alcohol addiction, incarcerated parents, all kinds of really hard situations. So it was really important to have that health aspect on the back end to really kind of dig in and see where these kids are and see what kind of resources and help they could be given on the back end to try to keep them from getting back into that kind of runaway lifestyle where many of them were, trying to act in adult ways that's far ahead of their years of where they are. So we would like to really thank our partners at the US Marshal Service and all these other agencies because we did have a really successful operation and we're proud of what we were able to do for the community through this. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you Chris Edge, acting U.S. Marshal for Charlotte.
Thank you. Good morning. Hope everyone's well. As the captain said, my name is Chris Edge. I'm the acting U.S. Marshal for Western North Carolina, and I'm stationed here in uptown Charlotte. I appreciate everyone coming out. I'd like to thank CMPD first and foremost for their partnership, and as we've partnered over many years, and this is another example of a great relationship and a good outcome. Also, North Carolina Department of Public Safety, Missing Persons Unit, and also like to mention the great folks at Atrium and Pat's Place as well for their help with this operation. The U.S. Marshal Service over the past couple of years have focused our efforts in locating missing and endangered children. Our experiences primarily in fugitive operations over the past 230 years have given us a lot of benefit in locating people, and this is a way that we can give back to some of the more vulnerable of our society, and we certainly appreciate the opportunity to make those partnerships to make that happen. This is just a great example of the work that can be done when partnering with professionals that have common goals and helping the most vulnerable in our community, and we appreciate the time and the effort that all the officers and healthcare providers have shared with us. It was very time-consuming for all that were involved, but we do appreciate their dedication in getting these children home and in a safe location. Thank you.
We are now going to hear from Dr. Stacy Reynolds, the Division Chief of Pediatric Emergency Medicine at Atrium Health, Levine Children's Hospital. Doctor.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Lieutenant, for the warm introduction. I just really want to say that we appreciate the collaborative relationship that we are lucky to have with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department and the U.S. Marshals. We're really grateful for the invitation to be able to work together on this important work in our community. An incredibly robust multidisciplinary team developed and supported this effort, which included the Atrium Health Levine Children's Emergency Department, the Atrium Health and Community Advocacy teams, our social workers, our chaplains, our child life specialists, our hospital-based pediatricians, and the leadership of Atrium Health Levine Children's Hospital overall. Our responsibility in this mission was to provide compassionate, thorough, and experienced care to support the patients at a time when they needed our care the most. We are extremely proud of how our teammates and law enforcement colleagues gave really 150% to place the safety, security, emotional, and physical well-being of these patients as the top priority as they worked hard to plan every detail of this all-hands-on-deck effort to recover these children. Our hospital is ready and willing to execute similar efforts in the future as needed. But most importantly, we really came here today to celebrate these efforts as a call to action within our entire community to join the campaign to recognize and recover vulnerable youth. The rescue and emergency medical care of vulnerable kids in Charlotte is really just the first step in providing meaningful physical and emotional healing for these kids. While we celebrate the commitment of the professionals involved in this effort, we also acknowledge that our community remains under-resourced to do this work effectively. So if hearing about this mission today touches your heart, we really hope that you'll be inspired to look for ways to strengthen our ability as a community to recognize our vulnerable youth, intervene early, offer truly compassionate healing options, and really restore the faith of these kids in the possibility of a healthy future. As you've heard throughout today, That work will require an all-hands-on-deck effort from our entire community. Thank you.
All right, we're going to open it up to questions. Since we do have 3 speakers, I would ask from our media partners in the room that we direct all of our questions that we have for the first speaker that comes up and subsequent from there, so that we're not, so that we just have a smoother transition and run of show this morning. So first question we have.
Were there any arrests associated with this operation?
Captain?
At this time, no, there aren't any arrests. Like I mentioned, there were a few people who were involved in human trafficking activities. So obviously that's something that we take very, very seriously. And an operation like this is kind of the jumping off point to start an investigation. So CMPD's Human Trafficking Task Force that we operate with the FBI was involved with this, and any kind of investigative leads that came out of these recoveries will certainly be followed up and investigated by them.
So it's fair to say that this could lead to arrests in the future of individuals involved with trafficking?
Yeah, I hope so.
Can you talk, I'm so sorry, just one more question. Can you just talk a little bit about missing and runaway juvenile cases? Have you seen an increase in those cases? And can you talk a little bit about what is going on behind the scenes? Even though some of these kids are walking away, are they being manipulated sometimes and taken advantage of?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. So as far as an increase, I don't think there's anything substantial as far as an increase in these cases. It's something that we see year after year. Just last year, our missing persons unit investigated over 2,300 missing individuals, and that's everything from juveniles to an elderly dementia patient that walks away. And we have nearly a 97% recovery rate on a day-to-day basis. So I think we have a really robust day-to-day operation. And this was really focusing in on kids who are actively taking measures to avoid being recovered. Many of them are operating, in an adult lifestyle, and I don't mean that, in any kind of sexual way. I mean, they're operating as adults. In other words, they're self-sustaining. They're, trying to make money, support themselves. And the question of whether or not any of them are being manipulated, I think when we say there's people involved in human trafficking, yes, they're being manipulated. Some of the things you see and hear online are true, and some of them aren't, but there definitely are predators out there in society who try to connect with kids through social media, through messaging. I mean, my own teenagers receive those messages sometimes. And so it's very disheartening, A, as a police officer, and B, as a parent, to see kids who are susceptible to this. The people who do this know exactly who they're looking for. They're looking for the people who are vulnerable. They're looking for people who have bad home lives and are looking for something else, who are more easily manipulated. So yes, that's certainly going on.
Of the 27 kids that juveniles you were able to bring back home and reunite with families or DSS services, were they mostly older teenagers, or could you give an age range of kind of the juveniles?
Yeah, I don't have a specific breakdown, but I think this is going to be kind of mostly in our maybe like 14 to 18 kind of age range. There were some younger, but kind of those older teenagers who are, in the few years before actual adulthood.
And is this operation planning to continue? Will this work continue, these partnerships together?
Absolutely. In fact, when this operation was over, the detectives and the marshals worked so well together, they basically just kept on working together and kept on recovering. But this is something that we do day in and day out. We don't just go and try to rescue kids one time a year or a couple times a year. This is something that we do all the time. And again, this was an effort to focus in on those really difficult to find kids who have special circumstances, who really, really need the health resources, and try to get them out of that so that they don't continue down that path in the future. And, many kids who do those kind of things end up engaged in criminal behavior. later on. And so anything we can do to kind of prevent that down the road, that's what we're committed to.
And what, sorry, one more question. What was that difference? You say, of course, day to day, you guys are looking for missing juveniles, but this, took extra steps. What were some of those extra steps that were needed to find these critical kids?
Yeah, so I mean, this is kids who are, your average, if we want to call something an average runaway, is a kid who, wants to go out all night and party with their friends or go somewhere where mom says they can't go or something like that, who are probably ultimately going to return back home at some point, whether that's hours or days. They're going to return back home. These are kids, like I said, who have really tried to completely get away from home situations, or they don't like being in CPS custody or living in a group home, or they're just heavily engaged in criminal activity, and they're obstinate, and they're not wanting to be parented or cared for. And so the extra steps that we went for is just a much more intensive, like the marshal said, we used some of their sort of manhunting skills and tools to go after these kids. Obviously we're always calling parents and calling friends and looking at social media and things like that to try to find these kids. But this just gives us an opportunity. You can imagine when we're already working 2,400 missing persons a year, that's a pretty significant caseload for detectives to work with. And so to have just a really focused period to try to dial in on some of these harder to find ones was a really great opportunity.
Are you able to say what types of places these kids were found in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, some were at friends' houses, some were at hotels. I know there was one who was living with an adult partner. All kind of situations, that kids don't need to be living alone in hotels. Kids don't need to be living with an older partner. And so it's really important to us to get them back into a healthy living situation, and especially get them the kind of mental health and social support that they need to hopefully be successful in life going forward.
How long were all these kids missing? For like 6 months or more? How long were some of these kids missing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few that have been outstanding for up to a year or more. For the most part, probably kind of in that 6 months to a year range, and that obviously that far exceeds our typical typical missing person. Teenager would be missing a few days to a week maybe. So these are really kids who are taking active measures not to be found.
Can somebody talk a little bit about what was done to connect with these young people? What was done to connect with them and kind of pull them out of those situations? And then what is being done now to help them to grow and to be healed from the trauma that they may have experienced, or whatever may have caused them to leave in the first place?
That's a question more appropriately answered by the doctor. Before we change speakers, any other questions for the captain? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Doctor?
Will you repeat your question again, just so I make sure I answer it well?
No problem at all, and thank you for talking to us. My question is, can you talk a little bit about how you were able to connect with these young people and in a way that maybe hasn't worked before to pull them out of those situations? And then can you talk a little bit about what work is being done now to help heal them from the traumas that they may have experienced while they were doing whatever it was that they were doing?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I think something that's often misunderstood about these kids is that they're running from their situation sometimes for very good, rational reasons. And they're getting up every morning and they're trying to really do their best to survive. They're not getting up every morning trying to fail. It's just the options on the street for how to survive are extremely limited. And, even if a kid goes out there with good intentions that they're going to stay on the straight and narrow,